When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe it was habit. Maybe, after years of holding myself together for my family, I just didn't know how to fall apart anymore. She stood by the kitchen door, her arms folded, her eyes cold in a way I had never seen before. My son, my only child, stood a few steps behind her. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, like a boy caught between truth and silence. It was quiet that morning. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the sound of the kettle I'd forgotten to turn off. I remember thinking how strange it was that such an ordinary day could carry such an ending. She said, "Maybe it's time you found your own place, Mama." Her voice was calm, almost polite. But those words cut deeper than any shout or insult ever could. For a long moment, I waited for my son to say something. Anything. I wanted him to laugh and say, "What are you talking about?" or "She's not going anywhere." But he didn't. He just stayed quiet. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I had always imagined that if my heart ever broke, it would be loud, a storm, a crash, something dramatic. But heartbreak, I learned, is quiet. It's a teacup left untouched. A folded blanket no one asks for. A son who doesn't look his mother in the eyes. I walked back to my room, closing the door softly behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed I'd slept in since my husband passed away. I looked at the family photo on my nightstand, the one taken the day my son got married. We were all smiling then. I remember thinking how lucky I was. I thought I was gaining a daughter that day. I didn't know I was also starting to lose my son. The words replayed in my head again and again. Maybe it's time you found your own place. It wasn't anger I felt. It was emptiness. Like something had quietly been taken from me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but stillness. And that's when I realized, you can lose your family long before you ever leave their home. I still remember the day my son was born. It was raining outside, a soft kind of rain that made the whole world feel calm. I was so young then, holding that tiny bundle in my arms, not knowing what kind of mother I would be. I only knew one thing, that I would love him with everything I had. He was my reason for waking up each morning, my reason for staying strong after my husband passed away so early in our life together. I raised him alone. Every decision I made, every small sacrifice, was for him. Our little house was never fancy, but it was full of laughter. I remember sitting by the window in the evenings, watching him do his homework, the sound of his pencil scratching the paper. Sometimes he'd look up at me and smile, that small, quiet smile that always made my heart melt. When he was little, he used to say, "Mama, when I grow up, I'll build you a big house. You'll never have to worry again." And I'd laugh and tell him, "I don't need a big house, son. Just stay kind, and I'll have everything." He kept that kindness for many years. Even when he went to college, he called me every night. Sometimes it was only for a minute or two, but I always waited for that call. Hearing his voice was enough. Then came the day he told me he had met someone. "Her name's Lila," he said, his voice full of warmth. "She's kind, Mama. You'll like her." I was happy for him, truly happy. I prayed every night that he would find a woman who would love him, respect him, and make his life full. When he brought her home for the first time, I was nervous. I remember wearing my best sari, cooking all his favorite dishes, wanting to make her feel welcome. She was beautiful, soft-spoken. She called me Mama from the moment she walked through the door. I liked her immediately. She helped me set the table, asked about my health, smiled often. That day, I thought, my son has chosen well. When they got married, it felt like gaining another child. I even told my friends I'm lucky. At first, I tried not to notice the changes. The house still looked the same curtains, the same family pictures on the walls, but something invisible had shifted. It was in the silence. In the way it lingered a little longer after I spoke. In the way my son smiled, but his eyes no longer met mine. Small things began to hurt quietly. One morning, I woke up early to make breakfast, his favorite pancakes, just like I used to when he was a boy. When they came to the table, my daughter-in-law smiled politely and said, "Oh, Mom, we don't usually eat fried food anymore. We're trying to be healthier." She said it kindly, but her tone made something inside me sink. My son nodded and added, "Yes, Mom, maybe just make tea for yourself next time." So I did. While they ate their fruit and oats, I sat quietly with my cup of tea, pretending not to notice the emptiness on the table where our shared meals used to be. It seemed like such a small thing, but that morning stayed with me for a long time. Days turned into weeks. And although the house looked warm and bright, I began to feel like a stranger living among familiar things. Sometimes I would hear them talking behind closed doors. They weren't arguing, just speaking softly, in whispers I couldn't understand. But when they came out and my daughter-in-law avoided my eyes, I knew the conversations were about me. I tried even harder to make things easy for her. I offered to help with her laundry, to water her plants, to cook her favorite dishes. She always smiled and said, "You don't have to, Mom," but there was a firmness behind her smile. I understood that what she really meant was please don't. So I stopped. And the house, which once echoed with laughter and conversation, began to grow quiet. One Sunday afternoon, I heard my son's voice raised slightly, something I had rarely heard from him. They were in the living room. "I just think she feels left out," he said. "She's my mother. She's used to being part of everything." My daughter-in-law's voice was calm but steady. "I understand, but she has to let us live our own life now. We're adults, and sometimes it feels like she's still running the house." There was a pause. Then my son said, more softly, "She doesn't mean any harm." "I know," she replied. "But it's difficult for me. I always feel like I'm being watched or judged. I can't relax in my own home." Her words hit me like a quiet blow. I hadn't realized that my presence could make someone feel trapped. I thought I was helping, being part of their life. That evening, I stayed in my room and didn't come out for dinner. I could hear their voices in the living room, talking, laughing softly. It sounded like a life that no longer needed me. There were still small moments of warmth, of course. My daughter-in-law would bring me tea in the afternoons or ask about my health. My son would check on me when I wasn't feeling well. But the closeness we once shared, the easy laughter, the comfort, was gone. He had become careful around me, like every word he said had to be measured. And I had become careful too. One night, while tidying the kitchen, I saw my daughter-in-law's phone left on the counter with a message open. It wasn't intentional, but my eyes caught a few lines. Her friend had written, "You're handling it so well. I don't know how you live with your mother-in-law in the same house. I'd go crazy." And she had replied, "It's not easy, but I'm managing. For now." I froze. I didn't want to read more. I quietly put the phone back and walked to my room. Those two words, "for now," echoed in my mind the entire night. The next morning, I decided to give them space. I told my son I was thinking of visiting my sister for a few days. To my surprise, he looked relieved. "That's a great idea, Mom," he said. "You've been home for so long. A little change will do you good." When she told me to find my own place, I didn't argue. I didn't ask why or how or when. I just stood there, holding the cup of tea I had made for everyone, now trembling in my hand. My son wouldn't look up. He simply stood there, silent, caught between love and duty, between his mother and his wife. And in that silence, I made my choice for him. I smiled. A small, tired smile. And I said, "It's all right. I understand." Then I turned back to the stove and poured the tea down the sink, pretending not to notice the tears filling my eyes. That night, I packed my bags. There wasn't much to take, just a few clothes, some old letters, and a small box of photographs I couldn't leave behind. As I folded each piece of clothing, I remembered the years that had passed in this house, the laughter, the birthdays, the nights of waiting for my son to come home from school, from college, from work. Every wall had a memory, and every corner had a story. When I finished packing, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around one last time. It was strange, everything looked the same, but nothing felt like mine anymore. In the morning, my son helped carry my suitcase to the car. He said softly, "Mom, it's just for a while. Until we figure things out." I nodded. But deep down, I knew that a while often becomes forever. My daughter-in-law stood at the doorway. She didn't look cruel or angry. She looked relieved. She said, "I hope you'll be comfortable, Mom. Please let us know if you need anything. Her voice was polite, almost too polite. I smiled at her. Take care of him, I said gently. Then I got into the car and closed the door. Through the window, I could see my son waving, his face uncertain, lost. And as the car moved away, I whispered to myself, this is how love sometimes looks, quiet, misunderstood, and left behind. My sister welcomed me with open arms. She lived in a small apartment across town, simple but warm, filled with the smell of jasmine and old books. For the first few days, she tried to cheer me up. We'll go for walks, she said. You'll meet new people. You'll feel better soon. I smiled and agreed, but inside, I felt hollow. Every morning, I still woke up early, expecting to hear my son's voice, the sound of his shoes at the door, the clinking of breakfast plates. But all I heard was silence. I would sit by the window with my tea and wonder, did they eat? Did he wear a sweater? Did she remember he likes extra sugar in his coffee? It's strange how motherhood never ends, even when your role in someone's life does. A week passed, then two. My son called once or twice. Each time, his voice was distant. How are you, Mom? He asked. I'm fine, I always said. Good, good, he would reply. Things are just busy here. We'll come visit soon. But he never did. Every time the phone rang, I hoped it would be him. Sometimes it was. Most times, it wasn't. One evening, I decided to visit the old neighborhood. I walked past the same park where I used to take him as a child, the swings, the bench where we ate ice cream, the tree where he once carved his name. The world had moved on, but my heart had stayed behind. I sat there for a long time, watching children play. Their laughter reminded me of him, of a boy who once held my hand and said, "Don't ever leave me, Mom." Now it was me who had been left behind. One night, I couldn't sleep. So I sat at the small desk in my sister's room and began to write. My dear son, I hope you're eating well. I hope you're happy. I'm not angry with you, and I never will be. I know life changes, and people change with it. But sometimes, I wish you would remember the little things, the way I waited for you after school, the nights I stayed awake when you were sick, the joy I felt every time you smiled. I miss you, not because I can't live without you, but because a part of me still believes we'll find our way back to each other one day. Love, Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in the box with the old photographs. I never sent it. Some things, I realized, are meant only to be felt, not said. It was almost 2 months later when he finally came. I heard the knock on the door and recognized it instantly, firm, familiar, hesitant. When I opened the door, there he was. My son. He looked tired. His eyes had lost their brightness. Mom, he said softly. Can I come in? I smiled and stepped aside. Of course. He sat on the couch, glancing around the small apartment. I didn't know it was this far. You should have told me you were uncomfortable here. I shook my head. I'm fine. It's quiet here. Peaceful. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, almost in a whisper, things have been different. The house doesn't feel the same. I looked at him carefully. Different how? He hesitated. I don't know. Quieter. She's been distant. I think she feels guilty, but she won't say it. I placed my hand over his. She's young, and marriage isn't easy. Give her time. He looked at me with surprise. You're not angry? I smiled faintly. Anger doesn't heal, my son. It only keeps the wound open. He lowered his eyes. I didn't stand up for you, Mom. I should have. I wanted to tell him that it didn't matter, but it did. Still, I chose kindness over truth. I said, what matters is that you came. He stayed for an hour. We talked about small things, his work, the weather, an old neighbor. When he left, he hugged me for the first time in months. That hug was soft, but heavy with unspoken words. After that visit, he began calling more often. Sometimes just for a minute, sometimes for a little longer. I never asked about her, and he never offered details. But slowly, the distance between us began to shrink. Still, I knew deep down, something had changed forever. After that call, I sat quietly for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, the words, the silence, the distance, and now, this unexpected news. A grandchild. The thought of it made my heart swell in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to hope again. Maybe this was life's way of giving me another chance, not to relive the past, but to love again without conditions. A grandchild meant laughter in the house again, little footsteps, soft cries, the scent of baby powder and milk. It meant a new beginning, a bridge between what was broken and what could still be mended. Days passed slowly after that. My son kept calling, telling me about doctor visits, baby shopping, tiny clothes. He even sent me a picture of a small yellow blanket. "She picked this one," he said, his voice carrying a quiet warmth. "She thought you'd like it." It was such a simple thing, yet it meant so much. I could tell that something in her heart had softened too. Maybe she finally understood what it meant to be a mother, the worry, the sleepless nights, the endless love. When the baby was born, my son called me again. His voice was trembling with emotion. "Mom," he said, "it's a girl." My heart melted. "A girl?" I whispered. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking into a laugh. "She looks just like you." Tears rolled down my cheeks as I pressed the phone to my ear. "What's her name?" I asked softly. "Grace," he said. "We named her Grace." I couldn't speak for a moment. Grace, such a simple, beautiful name. It felt like an answer to all the prayers I had whispered in the dark. Grace. Forgiveness. Peace. A week later, they invited me to visit. I hesitated at first. I was afraid of reopening wounds, afraid of the silence, of not belonging. But my sister said gently, "Go. It's time." So I went. My hands trembled as I stood before their house again. It looked the same blue door, the same flowers by the steps, but everything felt different. I knocked softly, and this time, when the door opened, she was the one standing there. My daughter-in-law. For a moment, we just looked at each other. There was no anger, no words, only a quiet understanding. Then she stepped aside and said softly, "Please, come in." The house smelled of baby powder and warm milk. My son appeared, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. "Mom," he said, smiling, "meet your granddaughter." I reached out with trembling hands. The baby was so small, so delicate. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, and in that instant, everything I had felt, the pain, the loneliness, the hurt, began to fade away. It was as if her touch carried forgiveness itself. I looked up at my son and daughter-in-law. "She's beautiful," I whispered. My daughter-in-law smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming." That simple thank you is enough. I didn't need explanations or apologies. I just needed that moment, the feeling that love had returned to where it belonged. As I held Grace in my arms, I realized that life has a strange way of healing us. Sometimes, the people who hurt us are the same ones who bring us peace again. Sometimes, love hides behind pride, waiting for the right time to show itself. That day, I didn't think about what had been lost. I only thought about what had been found, a family, a new beginning, and a love that had survived the storm. That evening, after everyone had gone to rest, I sat in the living room holding little Grace in my arms. The house was quiet, except for the soft rhythm of her breathing. The moonlight slipped through the curtains, touching her tiny face, and I thought to myself, this is what peace feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just gentle and still. My son came and sat beside me. He looked tired but happy. "She won't sleep unless someone's holding her," he said, smiling softly. "She's already spoiled." I laughed quietly. "That's how love begins," I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, guilt and gratitude mixed together. "Mom," he said, "thank you for forgiving us." I don't think I ever really said I'm sorry. I shook my head. There's no need. Life teaches all of us in different ways. What matters is that we're here now. He nodded, his eyes glistening. "She's been wanting to tell you something too," he said. My daughter-in-law stood by the doorway, hesitant. She walked slowly toward me and knelt beside my chair. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I was scared of losing my place, scared that he would always love you more." I didn't understand then, but now, after having Grace, I do. A mother's love never fades. It only grows. Her words broke something open inside me, not pain, but release. I reached out and touched her hand. "We all make mistakes," I said gently, "but love gives us a chance to make them right." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. And for the first time, she leaned forward and hugged me, a long, trembling hug that carried every apology she couldn't say before. That night, when I went back to my sister's house, I felt lighter. The world outside was quiet, washed clean by the evening rain. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Days turned into weeks, and I began visiting them often. I would help with the baby, cook small meals, tell stories while she slept. The house no longer felt like a place I was pushed out of, it felt like home again. Not the same as before, but something gentler, wiser, more forgiving. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch rocking Grace to sleep, I thought about the journey we had all taken, from love to loss, from silence to forgiveness. I realized that life isn't about holding on to what hurts. It's about finding the courage to let go, to make space for healing. Sometimes, we wait for others to say sorry, but the truth is, peace begins when we stop waiting and start forgiving. Grace stirred in my arms, her small fingers curling around mine. I smiled and whispered, "You came to teach us what love really means." As the sun dipped low and the light turned golden, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The pain that once felt endless had turned into something soft, a memory, no longer a wound. In that quiet moment, I understood something simple and true: love never truly leaves. It changes, it bends, it hides behind time and pride, but it always finds its way back home.